Okay, so let's carry on and talk about risks, specifically some risk factors that might predict some negative outcomes of childbirth, and then what some of those negative outcomes happen to be. So this slide is really just a list of things that put one at an elevated risk of having a complicated pregnancy. Not this image over here. Well, let me just talk about this. So this image over here is what we were talking about, cerebral palsy, and this is a phenomena. This is caused by lack of blood to the brain during childbirth. This might be because you have an umbilical cord wrapped around your neck. Perhaps you were stuck in the birth canal. A whole host of reasons could result in cerebral palsy. I had a student a couple semesters ago who was a twin, and his sister had cerebral palsy, and it was a complication of multiple births. But some of the risk factors that make it might potentially have more complications. You'll notice one is under 17 and the other is over 40. So the idea here is that your body is either not quite fully developed, or your body and your eggs are starting to get older. I do have a friend who argues that this is just a scare tactic that society imposes upon women, so that young women will feel shame towards having babies and older women will feel shame towards having babies. So take that with whatever you want, but there do seem to be some elevated rates of negative outcomes associated with women who are quite young and women who are a little bit older. A lot of women after the age of 40 may not even be ovulating anymore. There's also some evidence that after the body has produced a certain number of babies, that the first or the fifth, so like it's almost as if she hasn't quite figured out how to make a baby or how to grow one. That's how I read this. I mean, I think about a lot of this stuff from the perspective of that we're natural machines, and the machine has to figure out what it's doing would be the first one, and then eventually machines wear out, right? So eventually they're just not as efficient as they once were. So that's kind of how I think of it. But then you also have things like poor prenatal care, illicit drugs, not adequate nutrition, too much stress, infections, bleeding. I mean, lots of things. This is really a very expensive, and I say the term expensive, not it doesn't cost money, but it is physiologically a very expensive thing to do. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of resources for the female body to produce another being. I have a friend right now, and she just recently had her baby, and she just looks so pretty. And we were commenting, we were speculating that this is all the hormones that are flowing through her body that make her look particular. Her skin is clear, her hair is thick, her eyes are bright, even though she's exhausted. And I kind of like to think of this as nature's way of sort of paying you back for all that extra. I know I'm talking to not everybody out there is a female, but I do think that it's one of the coolest things that women can do. But I don't want to also suggest that if a woman chooses not to, that there's something, or I don't want to, because there's a fine line between saying that this is what you're programmed for, and then at the same time shaming women who, for whatever reason, can't have babies, because not all women's bodies are capable of doing that. Some of them just, yeah. So I don't want to shame women who don't, but I do want to celebrate that it's a very hard thing. Okay, physiologically hard, potentially, for some women. Okay, I digress. This slide, and I forgot to set my timer, so I don't know how long I'm rambling on. This slide is a list of all of the potential complicated outcomes. Well, they're actually not, but some terms. So to say that a child is stillborn versus a miscarriage, if the pregnancy ends spontaneously before 20 weeks, that's called a miscarriage. If it's after 20 weeks, that's called a stillbirth. What does it say? There are about 6 stillbirths for every 1,000 live births. And they're more often genetically boys than they are girls. Kind of hinted at that before. But if you go back to the chapter where we were talking about the egg and the sperm joining up, a great majority of them don't actually ever implant in the placenta. So, these eggs and these sperms are coming together all the time. They're not making babies as often. Well, a fraction of the time they actually end up making a baby. Your very low birth weight babies, these are ones that are under 2 pounds. These are babies that fit in a part of your hand. Low birth weight under 5. Preterm is under 37. So like my son was technically preemie because he was 36 weeks. Small for weight, small for date. So that's babies that are been in the uterus been in the womb with no boo. I love that. They've been in the womb for 40 weeks, but they're smaller than they're supposed to be. And sometimes this is decided by sonograms or measuring a mother's belly, things like this. So that's small for date. Age of viability. So an age of viability simply means that a baby who is born at a certain number of developmental weeks will survive. And that number is getting younger and younger and younger. And you could philosophically contemplate, if it requires technology and medicine for these babies to survive, what would have happened in a less developed country or at a time in human history where there was less technology, when humans were living on the savannah, that kind of thing. It's kind of it's a philosophical thing. What's it say? 1 in 3 infant deaths are to preterm babies. There are some pretty small babies that survive. And there's some pretty small babies that don't survive. Post-maturity, that's what we were talking about before, when you go past 2 weeks. So my mother would have been post-maturity. They don't let you go 2 weeks anymore. Kangaroo care is a term that's mentioned in your textbook. And if any of you are going into nursing and particularly interested in baby nursing, being a baby nurse, no doubt maybe you've already heard of kangaroo care. But that's really the strapping on the baby. That's the carrying the baby skin to skin, flesh to flesh. And it's, again, I think this supports my philosophical position that this is a natural part of the human animal. But what the research tells us, when you put babies skin to skin and you keep them like that and you hold them like that, they will heal and thrive and grow faster than if we put them in these machines, right? That's what you got over here. You got this incubator, you got a plastic box, and a baby is in a plastic box. I mean, they come out of the womb and it's warm and sheltered and they're all bundled up and they hear their mama's voice and they hear their mama's heartbeat. And then you're going to put them in a plastic box with beeping and buzzing. And my son he was in a plastic box for a while. Anyway, that's kangaroo care. So kangaroo care is like, as often as possible, you put that baby skin to skin. And I don't know what it is about the skin. I mean, no doubt you all know flesh is different. You prefer to be flesh to flesh with your lover. So I don't know the specifics of how all that works. And then protective factors is a term given to a host of individual and environmental traits that enable or make it easier for a child to grow and overcome all of the risks associated with being low birth weight. So one of the complications with being low birth weight or being preemie is your lungs are not fully developed. So at 36 weeks, lungs are not typically fully developed. So that means that a child can't breathe well on their own. And that's often why they're put in incubators like this. They're put in boxes that have a really dense oxygen concentration, because remember, you need enough oxygen so you don't end up with cerebral palsy, right? Like this. So anyway, I'm digressing. But these protective factors, so they're personal factors, individual attributes, energy, sociability, these kinds of things. And they're environmental factors, and those are when you have a responsive caregiver, right? So affectionate ties with at least one supportive person. And it's we'll kind of get to this notion when we talk about attachment, but it's the idea that a person's individual personality traits makes them appealing, and other people want to interact with them. When our personality is such, when babies are cute, and one of the evolutionary psychological reasons that we find babies cute is so that we will give them all of the never ending care that a baby needs. And the fact that communities, like my friend at church who just had her baby, and all of the we're all, oh, isn't he cute? Let me hold him, right? That creates a community of people to help take care of this completely dependent biological creature. And mom needs us to help her because mom needs to rest sometime. Her body is still recovering from this process. So the phenomena, the biological phenomena that babies are so cute and that so many people want to help, that's what helps us survive, right? That's a protective factor of survival, is that babies are cute and they smell good. Okay, let me just move on, I think. I'm not sure my time. I'm just going to sort of move on because this will be the last one of these lectures for this chapter. I'm actually ending this chapter about halfway through. I'm ending it at page 105, and then I will carry on with that topic in a whole nother set of lectures. But with this chart, what this slide is about infant mortality, the infant mortality rate, and sudden infant death, which both of those will show up on a quiz. Your book has a chart. This one is a cut and pasted a couple of years ago, but your book has a chart on infant mortality on page 103. Infant mortality is simply defined as the death to children under the age of 1 year. And it is considered a variable. It's used by demographers and social scientists and World Health Organization to measure the well-being, the overall well-being of a society or country. Because the argument goes like this, that infants are the most dependent. They're the absolute, they are the absolute most dependent on other people to take care of them. Their survival depends on prenatal care for their mother, clean air, clean water, a supportive system. So this measure is often used, like I said, as a measure of overall well-being in a society. This chart puts United States down here at the bottom. It suggests that 6 out of every 1,000 deaths, 6 out of every 1,000 live births are compared. So you have 1,000 live births and you have 6 infant deaths for under 1 year. And some of the other nations on here that have lower numbers, Poland, Austria, Ireland, Greece, Israel, all of these states have lower infant mortality rates. And then of course there's racial and economic disparities. People of color, poor people die at higher rates in the first year of life than do white people. Sudden infant death, oh, and then there's another one in your chart, in your book. Your book actually says the United States is at 6.8. Sudden infant death is defined as a death to a child within the first year that does not have another otherwise identifiable cause. The highest rates, we had a case of SIDS in my family as well. The highest rate seems to be between 2 and 3. Sometimes it's associated with a heart defect that goes undiagnosed in these early stages of life. It's been associated with household smoking or a caregiver, being a cigarette smoker, too much stuff. So there are best practices, and this is probably a quiz question. It's not on the outline. I'm not sure if it's on here or not, but some of the best practices, yes, it is, are to sleep on their back, right? And to have nothing in the crib. One theory is that children are rebreathing their own air. So they're breathing out carbon monoxide and they're breathing in oxygen depleted, that carbon dioxide again, that they're not getting enough oxygen rich air. And because their bodies are still, they haven't figured out how to use their bodies well, they may not be able to turn away or roll over. So you lay the baby on their back, you make sure there's nothing else in the crib. And then this, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Because some folks who also advocate for co-sleeping claim, some SIDS prevention people claim that co-sleeping prevents or increases the chances of dying from SIDS. Co-sleeping advocates argue no, because parents really don't sleep that soundly when their baby is with them. So you end up again with, just thoughtful decision making. The number one causes, the other causes of children in this first, so primary cause of children, if it's not by SIDS during this stage of life, are suffocation, traffic accidents, drowning, and fires. And then the last box, and I know I've gone way over what I typically do, the last box that does not actually appear to be in your book is a little bit about post-menopausal depression, which is real. This is not in your head. This is real. And the same way that when I was talking about maternal deaths, there is an argument that we don't take postpartum depression seriously enough, and women don't report it enough. And the consequences for severe depression might be they don't take care of their children, they don't bond with their children, they could suffer depression for long term because they don't come out of this depression. This is a very normal experience. Sometimes it's called the baby blues. It's associated with a profound change in her hormones, a profound drop. And some of the hormones that you may experience when you're pregnant make you feel pretty good, and now all of a sudden they're gone. So it was just some of the statistics about it's not uncommon, might be hormonal, it might be, oh, you're freaking tired all the time, the baby doesn't sleep more than an hour, your husband's away at work, you already have 2 other kids, you're just exhausted. And then sometimes it just radically changes your life in such a way that you can't anticipate. I think this is especially true with a first child. My husband will say, you didn't even know, well, you can't even decide when you go to the bathroom anymore. So it can be, but so it's real, and that's what I want to say. And get help, right? Don't be afraid to talk to somebody. You have the cases of Andrea Yates, she's mentioned on your outline. So she was a woman that had like 5 or 6 babies, and her doctor told her, don't have any more babies because you suffer from postpartum. And she had another one, and she drowned all of her babies. Anyway, so consequences, mothers bonding, and that's all I want to say about that is take it seriously. It's a real thing. It's related to biology. It's related to change. It's not all in your head. And it's, yeah, okay. So this wraps us up. That's a nice depressing note to end on. I think I will move into the next little section of lectures about the first year of life. Thank you for spending time with me.